It's been wonderful to study your career and also to study the vision that you bring to so many things as a principal and as a performer and as a parishioner or congregation member and minister here. And I want to give you an opportunity to just tell your story of faith.
Wow, my story of faith is, I think it's fascinating. And the more I meditate and pray, I realize that it began before I recognized it. So I'll probably start at the beginning of my remembrance. And that will be as a young girl in the neighborhood of Appaline and 7 Mile. My neighborhood changed between the year I was 5 and 6. And so there were all these new children my age, and we went to school together. And one summer, when I was about 10, there was a neighbor who took a bunch of us in her car to a church for Vacation Bible School. And it was on Elmhurst in Livernois, True Faith Baptist Church. The pastor was Reverend James H. Morton. He eventually became a bishop, and he's a brother of Bishop Paul S. Morton. He was young, he was in his 20s, and he could preach and pray and sing. Boy, could he sing. And I went to Vacation Bible School. It was so exciting. And after it was over and he did the invitation, I was intrigued, interested, moved. So I joined church. At this time, my parents were not members of church. And so every Sunday, my mom would allow me to walk around the block to Steele Street, the next block over, and ride to church with Miss Hill. I was the only kid that started after Vacation Bible School ended. But for years, I went to church with Miss Hill, and then I developed my faith walk. I was baptized and filled with the Holy Ghost, all in that year. And my parents came to bear witness. And my experience was so phenomenal. Coming up out of the water, having the elders wrap their arms around me, these women who sat on the front row wearing white. And I wanted to just run through the church. But I knew better as a 10-year-old, but I kept that memory in my heart. And so for me, faith has always been personal, transformative, and community. And so those three things have always been a part of my faith walk. Something very deep and personal and transformative, and always within the context of a community that affirmed me, that believed in me, that poured into me self-confidence when I may have been in situations, in worlds, in spaces that would try to deny me that right. I understood that God was real and that Jesus had an open invitation for a young girl in Detroit to come to the table. And I've been going to that table. I've been drinking from that well since then. So it's been over 52 years now.
Can you talk a little bit about your calling to be a dancer and a choreographer and your faith as well?
I think that in faith, religion, right, and structures, there has been conflict, right? That at this church that I received this experience was a Baptist church. And so learning to dance, because it was around 13 that I got introduced to Clifford Fierce, who was an original Dunham dancer. So this will all make sense because Catherine Dunham, this pioneer who created a dance technique in her honor, studied Haitian, Caribbean, African dance and its connection to the ways of being for Black people throughout the diaspora. So the body politic and moving the body as a part of a religious experience is right there in front of our eyes, right? But people try to shape it and separate it, right? And that comes from dogma and doctrine that says when we take the Protestant worldview or Eurocentric worldview that the body should be silent and quiet. And that's the same in ballet. And so Catherine Dunham released that for us, like this movement is an organic part of our religious experience. And so if you look at some churches and the way they shout, right, from the ring shout to today, if you turn the music off and put on African drums, it would make sense. So for me, at an early age when I could not explain it theologically, but I understood it in my body to be right. So if I was a part of a faith community that did not honor the arts, then I would kind of separate from that as I developed my artistic abilities. But I longed for it because my faith was deeply rooted in my being. And so that's why I was so excited when my cousins told me about Fellowship Chapel, a church where they supported the arts. And I didn't believe them. I actually came on a dare that I didn't think that existed because I had cultivated that for myself personally, but I had no place to connect to community with it. I had my community of artists, I had my community of church people, but they didn't always end up in the same spaces. So to be able to come somewhere and to be accepted wholly, fully, as my faith expression, which is also artistic, which is also cultural, I found my home. And I think everyone should, as they develop their faith journey, find a place that they can call home. Because there in that place, that space, they can be free and they can make the greatest contribution to community through their faith.
You went on for a D-Min, and you focused on womanist thought.
Yes.
And I'm interested to know about how that informs what you do and how that journey took place, and how is that expressed in your life now?
Well, it's funny. It really is an affirmation. From the time I was 10 and started going to church regularly, I had questions. I believed fully, wholeheartedly. I questioned why the only stories about women were either very horrible or impossible, right? You could either be the virtuous woman in Proverbs 30, or you can be Mary. And those were kind of, unattainable, or the few terrible women. I'm like, God, come on now. So even as a child, when I couldn't necessarily put language to it, I had these questions. So it was like I hid them in my heart and I knew they would be answered one day. So going to seminary is very liberating, right? Because you have to deconstruct some of your learning, right? And it's okay. It's a safe space to do it, and if you're willing to do it. Because I see people who hear the truth and they're like, well, I'm not willing. I'd rather keep doing what I've been doing. It's working for me. So going to seminary was very liberating because I was able to go, aha, yes, that's what I know, right? What I knew intuitively. That I knew intuitively about the 300-year gap between the European and the Nicene, and then there's the Ethiopian practices, and there's this African tradition. So it really made all these things come alive in a very scholarly way, but it was something that I knew intuitively. And so it is with womanist theology. I knew that the God of our creation was in intimate relationship with women to do amazing things, whether they met God like Hagar in the wilderness or whether God came and found them, right? I knew this. This womanist theology was a way for me to wrestle with the text from my lens, from an African-American woman who has a particular experience in a particular context. What does this text say to me? And to be able to have that freedom, it's just, so I'm living it, right? But I'm living it as resistance. But now I can live it in community. Right? When I live in a community, I can read Dolores Williams. I can read Renita Weems, and I've met Renita Weems and Terrell, and Mitzi Smith is the one who, Dr. Smith is a person at seminary that really opened my eyes, and I was like, where did this come from? Yes, this is what I've been looking for. And I can really say that about my faith journey, that I have this path and I have this desire, and throughout my life, God has orchestrated the circumstances for me to find the answer and blossom. So womanist theology, after studying and reading, what I did is I put together a group of young women And the question was, can womanist theology be transformative? Right? Because many church traditions spend a lot of time and energy oppressing people, whether they're oppressing women, LGBTQIA+. They have a whole few scriptures that they use, and it's like, but it's so much bigger than that, right? Than these two scriptures. First of all, you're in the Pauline letters, right? You're not in the Synoptic Gospels with that, and then you're in Leviticus, and people stay there to keep certain groups oppressed. And Jesus said, I came to set the captives free, to give sight to the blind, right? To declare the year of the Lord. And so we're either going to all be free, but not some of us and the rest of, no, all of us deserve freedom. And so womanist theology did that for me. It gave language, right? Study, scholarship, and that these women, the originals, were students of Cone, right? Who gave us liberation theology. How can you liberate if women are still oppressed? How can you liberate when women who have the gospel message within them have to go down on the floor to preach, can't stand in the pulpit? All that, destroy all of that, right? And so even our great scholars changed, shifted, opened his mind. Right?
Yeah.
So that, it was just affirming what I already knew, right? What I already knew intuitively, what I already knew in my body, what I already knew about how the church's existence, sustainability from 2,000 years has been because of women, right?
Always.
It's logical, right? But if you don't have language for it, you just know it, but you can't really put your finger on it. And so this was able to give me a clear path.
I love the way you put that, and in what was going through my mind as you were speaking, besides being just so touched by everything you said, is how God is a bit of a dancer for you.
Yes. We are in a dance together.